Surrender Starmer. That's the label the Prime in EU relations. And frankly, Nigel Farage...
Welcome along. So today, Prime Minister Keir Starmer held a press conference.
Do the right thing and step down.
The silence is deafening. While Britain reels from shocking new revelations, Nigel Farage has just dropped a bombshell exposing a massive council corruption scandal that threatens to shake the very foundations of local government. Yet, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader who promised transparency and justice, remains eerily silent. Why is Starmer hiding? What are the consequences for ordinary Britons? The truth is unravelling fast, and this story is far from over. The details emerging right now are nothing short of explosive. Nigel Farage, the outspoken political figure known for his no-nonsense approach, has revealed a web of deceit and mismanagement involving millions of pounds of public money siphoned off by council officials. This isn't a minor oversight or a case of bureaucratic bungling. It's a systematic, calculated corruption scandal that has gone unchecked for years. Farage's revelations come from inside sources and leaked documents that lay bare how council contracts were awarded to friends and family, how funds meant for community projects vanished without a trace, and how key local leaders turned a blind eye while the public suffered. The scale of the scandal is staggering, with estimates suggesting tens of millions of pounds have been misappropriated. This money could have been spent on vital services, schools, hospitals, housing, yet instead it has lined the pockets of a corrupt few. The shockwaves of this scandal are only beginning to spread, but already citizens are demanding answers. How could this happen under the watch of elected officials? What oversight failed so badly? And most importantly, what will be done to hold those responsible accountable? Yet, amid this growing storm, one figure's silence stands out: Keir Starmer. The Labour leader, who campaigned heavily on rooting out corruption and championing the cause of the ordinary British voter, has yet to make a single public statement. No condemnation, no call for investigations, no demands for justice. Just silence. For a leader whose political future depends on trust and integrity, this deafening silence is raising eyebrows and stoking suspicions. Why would Starmer stay quiet on such a critical issue? Some insiders speculate that Starmer's team may be trying to distance themselves, worried that this scandal could spill over and implicate Labour-run councils. Others believe there may be political calculations at play, perhaps an attempt to avoid rocking the boat before upcoming elections, or worse, a sign that the party is compromised in some way. Whatever the reason, the absence of any strong response is sending a clear message. When it comes to council corruption, Starmer is choosing to stay in the shadows. This silence is not just frustrating voters, it's undermining faith in Labour's promise to be the party of change. The timing couldn't be worse. Britain is already grappling with a cost of living crisis, stretched public services, and rising distrust in government. Every pound lost to corruption is a pound taken from families struggling to make ends meet. As Farage's exposé gains momentum, calls for urgent action are pouring in from all sides. Community leaders, opposition politicians, and ordinary citizens who want transparency and justice. The question now is whether Starmer will break his silence and stand with the people, or continue to let this scandal fester unchecked. The coming days will reveal much about his leadership and the fate of millions of Britons dependent on honest, accountable government. The fallout from Nigel Farage's explosive revelations about the massive council corruption scandal is rapidly escalating, sending shockwaves across the political landscape. While the public demands urgent answers and decisive action, the silence from Keir Starmer and the Labour leadership is growing increasingly conspicuous and troubling. This scandal, involving widespread misappropriation of public funds within councils, strikes at the heart of local governance and public trust. For many Britons, the discovery that millions of pounds intended for essential community services, such as healthcare, education and infrastructure, have instead been funneled into corrupt schemes is deeply infuriating. The consequences are severe. Schools remain underfunded, hospitals struggle with shortages, and vital social programmes face cutbacks, all while a small circle of council officials and their associates reap the benefits of deceit. Farage's exposé has shone an unforgiving spotlight on these abuses, using leaked documents and whistleblower testimonies to reveal the extent of the betrayal. Despite the mounting evidence and public outrage, Starmer's Labour Party remains curiously muted. This silence is not just politically risky, it threatens to erode the very foundations of the party's credibility. Labour, which has traditionally positioned itself as the defender of working-class interests and a champion against corruption, now risks being seen as complacent or complicit. Critics argue that this lack of response suggests an unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths within their own ranks, particularly as some of the implicated councils are Labour-led. The reluctance to publicly address the scandal raises questions about internal party dynamics and the potential shielding of allies from scrutiny. It also highlights a broader issue of accountability within the party, where leadership may be prioritising political expediency over transparency and justice. The political ramifications are significant. Opposition parties and grassroots activists have seized on Farage's revelations to criticise Labour's leadership, accusing Starmer of abandoning his campaign promises and failing to protect voters from corruption. The Conservative Party, despite its own challenges, has amplified calls for a full, independent investigation into the council misconduct, framing the scandal as a national crisis requiring immediate government intervention. Meanwhile, Reform UK has also capitalised on the public's anger, demanding stronger anti-corruption measures and threatening to hold Labour councils accountable through targeted legal and electoral strategies. These developments intensify pressure on Starmer, whose political survival increasingly depends on his ability to navigate this crisis effectively. Failure to respond decisively could trigger defections within Labour's ranks and erode voter confidence ahead of upcoming elections, potentially reshaping the political landscape in Britain. Beyond party politics, the scandal exposes deeper systemic problems within local government oversight. Investigations have revealed that mechanisms designed to prevent corruption, such as internal audits, transparency requirements, and whistleblower protections, have been either weakened or ignored in multiple councils. The result is a culture where unethical behaviour flourishes unchecked, with few consequences for those responsible. This institutional failure fuels public distrust not only in local authorities but in the broader democratic system. Citizens feel betrayed by leaders who are supposed to serve their interests but instead exploit their positions for personal gain. This erosion of trust undermines social cohesion and discourages civic engagement, posing a threat to the health of Britain's democracy itself. Addressing these issues requires more than political posturing. It demands a comprehensive overhaul of governance structures, enhanced transparency, and a renewed commitment to ethical leadership. Public reaction to the scandal has been swift and vociferous. Community groups, local activists, and ordinary citizens have organised protests and petitions demanding accountability. Social media platforms are ablaze with calls for justice as people share stories of how corruption has directly impacted their lives. Many recount the decline in public services that they attribute to the misappropriated funds, painting a grim picture of neglected neighbourhoods, deteriorating infrastructure, and overwhelmed social care systems. This groundswell of activism signals a growing impatience with traditional politics and a demand for radical change. However, the effectiveness of this movement depends heavily on political leaders' willingness to listen and respond. Starmer's silence risks alienating these voices and reinforcing perceptions that Labour is disconnected from the concerns of everyday Britons. Amid this turmoil, the role of investigative journalism has been crucial in uncovering the extent of the council corruption. Farage's revelations are supported by independent media outlets that have published detailed reports, exposing patterns of nepotism, bribery, and contract rigging. These investigations have forced authorities to open formal inquiries and have prompted calls for stricter laws to combat local government corruption. However, journalists face significant challenges, including limited access to information, legal obstacles, and political pressure. The continued exposure of corruption depends on protecting press freedom and ensuring that investigative reporters can operate without fear of retribution. The media's role as a watchdog is more vital than ever in holding power to account and informing the public. Looking ahead, the political and social consequences of this scandal will likely unfold over months and years. For Starmer and Labour, the immediate challenge is to break the silence and present a clear plan to address corruption within their councils. This should include supporting thorough investigations, cooperating with law enforcement, and committing to reforms that increase transparency and accountability. Politically, Starmer must demonstrate leadership and regain the trust of voters who are disillusioned by this crisis. Failure to act decisively could result in electoral losses and long-term damage to Labour's reputation. For the British public, the scandal serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance in democratic governance and the need for ongoing efforts to combat corruption at all levels of government. Ultimately, the Nigel Farage Council corruption exposé has unveiled a critical breach of public trust that threatens to destabilise local government and tarnish political institutions. It has also created a pivotal moment for Keir Starmer and Labour, challenging them to either confront the problem head-on or risk further alienation and decline. The coming weeks will be crucial as investigations progress and political actors respond. The people of Britain deserve transparency, justice and effective leadership, and the pressure on Starmer to deliver is mounting by the minute. As the council corruption scandal continues to unfold, the deeper implications for British democracy become increasingly apparent. This is not merely a story about misused funds or local government failures. It is a profound test of the institutions that underpin the entire political system. For decades, local councils have been the front line of public service delivery, managing everything from housing and social care to education and transport. Their role is vital in ensuring that government policies translate into tangible benefits for communities. However, the recent revelations have shattered the public's confidence in these bodies, exposing vulnerabilities that have allowed corruption to take root and flourish. The systemic issues unearthed suggest that weaknesses in oversight, regulatory frameworks and political accountability have been exploited by individuals prioritising personal gain over public good. This situation demands urgent and comprehensive reform, as the current state of affairs poses a risk not only to service delivery, but to democratic legitimacy itself. One of the most disturbing aspects of the scandal is how it reveals the intersections of political power, patronage networks, and financial misconduct. The investigations have documented numerous cases where contracts were awarded not based on merit, but through cronyism and nepotism. Favoured companies received lucrative deals without proper tendering processes, often delivering substandard work at inflated costs. Whistleblowers have described an environment where dissent was discouraged and attempts to expose wrongdoing were met with intimidation or career repercussions. This culture of silence and fear has allowed corruption to persist unchecked, creating an uneven playing field that undermines competition and stifles innovation in public services. The broader economic consequences are significant, as misallocation of resources hinders community development and wastes taxpayer money. The public, already burdened by rising living costs and austerity measures, is understandably outraged that their hard-earned funds have been siphoned away through corrupt practices. Keir Starmer's leadership is now under intense scrutiny as calls grow for him to take decisive action. The Labour leader faces a critical choice: to confront the crisis head-on with transparency and resolve, or to continue with a cautious approach that risks further alienating voters. Early reactions from Starmer's camp have been criticised as vague and insufficient, lacking the urgency demanded by the scale of the scandal. Political commentators argue that Labour's hesitation is partly due to internal divisions, with factions reluctant to expose uncomfortable truths that might implicate influential party members or damage electoral prospects in key regions. This internal conflict complicates efforts to mount a unified response and risks presenting a fragmented image to the public. Moreover, the perceived reluctance feeds narratives advanced by opposition parties that Labour is unable or unwilling to police itself. In this climate, Starmer's ability to restore confidence hinges on his willingness to implement meaningful reforms and demonstrate genuine accountability. Opposition parties have been quick to seize the moment, intensifying their criticism and proposing alternative policies aimed at eradicating corruption. The Conservatives have emphasised the need for stronger enforcement agencies and increased funding for anti-corruption bodies, pledging to hold all councils accountable regardless of party affiliation. Meanwhile, Reform UK has capitalised on public discontent by framing the scandal as evidence of systemic failure requiring radical change. Their calls for transparency, tougher penalties, and citizen oversight resonate with voters frustrated by the perceived lack of responsiveness from traditional political institutions. These developments highlight an evolving political landscape where issues of integrity and governance are becoming central battlegrounds. The scandal could catalyse shifts in voter allegiances and spur demands for new voices and approaches in British politics. For Labour, this means that regaining trust is not just about damage control, but about articulating a compelling vision for clean and effective governance. The scandal also underscores the vital role of civil society and grassroots activism in demanding accountability. Community organisations and local campaigners have been instrumental in bringing attention to corruption, mobilising protests, and pressuring officials to act. Their efforts reflect a broader desire for greater citizen participation in governance, including mechanisms for oversight and input into decision-making processes. Many activists argue that without increased transparency and public engagement, corruption will continue to thrive behind closed doors. They call for reforms such as open contracting, stronger whistleblower protections, and enhanced public scrutiny of council operations. These proposals, if implemented, could transform local governance into a more inclusive and accountable system. However, achieving this requires political will and collaboration across party lines, as well as sustained commitment from government agencies and watchdog groups. Media coverage remains a critical factor in shaping public perception and driving accountability. Investigative journalism has exposed many facets of the scandal, with reporters uncovering detailed evidence of wrongdoing and giving voice to victims and whistleblowers. The press serves as a vital check on power, ensuring that corrupt practices do not remain hidden. However, the media landscape itself faces challenges, including declining revenues and political pressures that threaten editorial independence. Supporting a free and robust press is essential to maintaining transparency and fostering an informed citizenry. Furthermore, social media platforms have amplified public outrage and facilitated grassroots mobilisation, but have also been arenas for misinformation and polarisation. Navigating this complex media environment will be crucial in maintaining a clear and accurate narrative around the scandal and the reforms it demands. In parallel to the political and social upheaval, legal and institutional responses are beginning to take shape. Several investigations have been launched at local and national levels, with prosecutors examining evidence for criminal charges and potential prosecutions. These legal processes will be closely watched, as successful convictions could serve as deterrents and reinforce the rule of law. At the same time, calls for legislative reform are growing louder. Experts advocate for stronger anti-corruption laws, clearer ethical standards for public of Bikauf,